All right, Chaz, let's get right to it. The Reds finished the first full calendar month of the season with a winning record. They started the month of May with a win and a series split against St. Louis. So, speaking to the big picture, as you sit this morning at the world headquarters for Charlie's Chalkboard, big picture, is this team stock up? Is it down? Or is it holding steady after 5 weeks of baseball?
It's funny, and I was actually talking to a couple a couple Reds about this, before the doubleheader on Wednesday. I said, "Well, 1, if you guys, win 1 today, then you're gonna clinch your best April since 2006, and 2, no, I'm gonna start working here in a nice story about how the Reds exceeded expectations in April." And then the doubleheader happened. Obviously, that story didn't happen. What I wanna see is the Reds be able to sustain momentum and have maybe a good series or a good stretch actually become more something tangible, like we haven't really seen since 2023. It was really a theme of last season. They'd have an awesome series and they kind of fall back. And the Cardinal series, they certainly responded in the finale, broken up by the rain delay on Thursday. But it's games like Wednesday and days like Wednesday where I want to see them take the next step. So right now I'm neutral because you kind of did see that last year too, where they couldn't push through. Right now I'm neutral until I do see them push through over a more sustained stretch.
So, since neutral wasn't one of the choices, do I read that as
Doc,
hold?
hold,
Hold?
yeah,
Okay.
hold.
Okay. You just kind of went off script there a little bit and went with neutral. So I wanted to be sure that I interpreted that correctly. But you're right. Listen, the Reds, though, they had one bad day in the last week. It just happened to be two games in a single day. They had one bad day. They had the 5 game winning streak, the doubleheader, then they got back on track against the Cards. So we'll see where it goes from there. They still trail the Cubs in the division. But overall, right now, after a month and a couple of days of baseball, parity reigns across baseball for the most part, outside of the almighty National League West. We know what's going on out there. You've got the Mets, the Tigers have stepped up, but lots of teams are in a pretty similar spot to the Cincinnati Reds right now as we get to early May in the baseball season. Welcome to Power Stacks, proud members of the Growler Podcast Network. Coming up on the show today, Chaz, the weight of Terry Francona's words. Let that sink in. The weight of Terry Francona's words. We're going to do that. Also, a season of searching so far for Jamer Candelario. We'll hear from Candelario. No, I know you talked to him about that, so that's coming up as well. And from Siskel and Ebert to Giesenslaw and Goldsmith. Our first exchange of ideas on what we would consider cinematic excellence.
Can I drop a hot take first?
I just I wanted before your hot take, I just wanted to know if you know who Siskel and Ebert is.
The review people, yes. My hot take is that my favorite part of the show is this dramatic tease that you do at the beginning of every episode. I mean, I have the rundown in front of me and I'm still hooked. I'm like,
And
man,
I've
this
got
stuff
you're
sounds
hooked.
good.
You're hooked. Okay, I got you. We'll see if producer Kent can get some dramatic tease music at some point for that coming up in the show. Let's do the leadoff spot though, as we work our way there. The leadoff spot is this. Confidence is a funny thing. And if you don't believe me, just ask Noelvi Marte. Marte had only been up for a few games when the Reds hit that Baltimore series. Since that series in Baltimore, he has started every game. And in the interviews that he's done that we've heard that are obviously in Spanish, my Spanish isn't great, but it's good enough to hear him say the same word multiple times, and that's confidencia, which is translated to confidence. So, what is a confident Noelvi Marte, and how is that benefiting him and the Reds at this point in the season?
Truly a season changer, and we'll see if he can even sustain this. But he's already massively exceeded expectations, and he's doing it in a way that seems more real. Because while there's been some nice pulled line drives and such, he's significantly cut down on the swing and miss one. He's more consistent on defense too, and he's hitting the ball the other way three. All signs of a more mature player who knows exactly what he is. To talk about kind of this step of the Noelve Marte story, though, you got to go back to last year, and that was where I started. I asked Freddie Benavides, who's really close with Noelvi, kind of led in a lot of ways that process behind the scenes with him last year. I asked Freddie about kind of the growth, but first I had to start. I asked Freddie, what happened last year? with Noelvi Marte post coming back from the suspension. Here's what Freddie said.
Oh, and I mean, think about it. He's one of the youngest guys in the league, having to deal with the adversity, some of the stuff that happened to him. Uh, just the pressure long to belong, and I think he wasn't ready physically. You know what I mean? Wasn't in great shape. Even though he did work out, he wasn't as flexible and wasn't ready to play.
How did you see him mentally? Kind of obviously he was struggling. He stayed in the lineup. How did you see him handle it?
Well, it's I mean, it's tough. Like you said, he's 22. He's trying to belong in the big. He's like trying to survive at a young guy. You know, whether the suspension or not, right?
Yeah.
It's always tough. The pressure to perform. I just think it was just tough for him. He was set back. He missed 80 days, and when he came back, it's just a lot for him to handle. You know, at a young age.
What was your message to him at the end of the season?
Well, just be as positive as can. Go back and work his tail off. Come back ready to go. This year's it's past. It's over. Forget about it and come back ready to come.
When he came up that first time, he wasn't. I don't think anyone was expecting this. Is that fair to say?
Well, I mean, that's fair. I mean, he came up because somebody was injured. He played a game, and I think he got sent out and came right back. That's great for him. I mean, he came in. He was ready to play. I mean, he worked his tail off in spring training. You know, when he got sent down, he played right away. And what he did at AAA and what they did with him there to get him ready to come up here was awesome.
So he comes up and he's on the bench for the first few days. Then he plays, I believe it was on Saturday, and he has a hell of a game. Like, was that a moment where you're and this staff like, all right,
Well, it was great. It was great to see. I think there was a play he made late in the game too. I think down the line and fired a ball across it to save a run or whatever it was. It was awesome to see that, and I think just you could see his confidence is starting to come back. I mean, he's always been a great player, right? Just needs confidence.
Then last thing is, how is he carrying himself down?
Great. I mean, like he belongs.
Yeah.
Like he belongs. So he's doing it. He's doing a great job.
So look at this Reds roster. Who has the most tools on the team from a position player perspective? It's Ellie, it's McLean, and then Marte's number 3. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Or you can even make the case that Marte has more tools than McLean. It's funny, like a debate that I was on the McLean side of was before they both debuted in spring training 2023. You heard a lot of people saying that they'd take Marte over McLean, and obviously I'm a big McLean guy, but that goes to show how highly the Reds view Marte's tool. He just had to kind of figure out how to play one and to take a lot of pressure off of himself. He's close friends with Julio Rodriguez, very, very close friends, the Seattle Mariners superstar. And Marte wants to be Julio. He wants to go stride for stride with his buddy. And I think the pressure he put on himself, as you heard Freddie allude to, weigh on him. I'll wrap up tying into this one last quote from one of Marte's closest friends on the team, Santiago Espinal. Espinal described their relationship as being like brothers. Espinal said Noelvi is at peace with himself mentally, and for that, I'm more proud of him than anything else. And that's pretty powerful to kind of see a young kid click in that way.
If you can be a big league ball player and you can have any sense of peace, quote unquote, peace and confidence coexisting, then that's a pretty good relationship when you're physically as gifted of a ball player as Noelvi Marte is. You know, there was one of the games in the St. Louis series, he was 0 for 4, but Terry Francona made a point to say how good the at-bats were, how good the swings were, and the contact that he made in some of those ABs. And so that's where they are. When he first, when he came off this hot road trip, I think you may have asked Francona about, Marte and what was going on and what was different. And he said, look, when we sent him back initially, we wanted him to earn it to get back here. We wanted him to earn it. But at the same time, we also told him we're pulling for you. And that statement from Terry Francona kind of builds into a good chunk of what we want to do on this show. And that is get into the weight of the words of a Hall of Fame manager who I think has the right combination of, you put managers in boxes. Are they a player's coach? Are they, good cop, bad cop? There's all that. I just think someone like Terry Francona has the right combination of all of the attributes that we would give to a winning people manager. And that's what managing is, right? You're managing personalities. You're managing people and trying to get the best out of them. What buttons do you push with which guys? Who needs a pat on the butt and who needs a kick in the head? There are all those things, but we're going to take this now into Tito's top 2 because we're going to talk about the weight of his words. And, he gets paid to win games. Guys in his position get paid to make tough decisions, and he's had some of those already with the Reds. And let's start with Jamer Candelario. Jamer Candelario went from playing every day to played a couple of games per series really on the most recent road trip, and then didn't play at all in the 4 games against St. Louis at home. So there was clearly a conversation had with Candelario, with Terry Francona, about where he stands and his playing time. How was that communicated? And then you can carry the story into how it was received by the Reds' highest paid player, not named Nick Martinez. Am I right about that?
Yep. And the story ultimately ends with Candelario landing on the injured list. But what was so interesting here was before any of that happened, Francona had a choice. Do you give Noelvi Marte all of the time that he needs from a playing time perspective to click, which Noelvi Marte is doing? Definitely pulling the trigger more or pulling the lever more quickly than you'd expect on making Marte an everyday player. I can guarantee half the managers or maybe more in the league would have stuck with Candelario and had Marte develop somewhere else. And then some certainly would have made the decision the Reds made going all in with the young player. But ruffling feathers is a part of the conversation as well. And Francona basically sat Candelario down on Monday and said, hey, the kid beat you out and you're not working good enough at bats. Kind of we're pulling for you too, but this is how I see your role right now. And a big theme of Francona that I've heard around the clubhouse from other players is he's a straight shooter. He tells you exactly what he's planning to do, and he says it's very important to always have a reason when players ask you about it. So he has the reason, and then he's very confident in his decisions. And so far from the clubhouse perspective, it seems like that's been received very well. So Francona then did something that frankly David Bell pretty much never did, which was say, I'm benching this player and we're going in another direction. And I said, Francona, I said to Francona, why do you handle it that way? Why are you so transparent? Why are you so direct with that type of messaging? Here's what Francona said about transparency behind the scenes and then publicly too.
I hope so. It's the best way I know how to do it. If it doesn't, you still got to try. Like, I think that's part of my job.
It's a part of the job, and it goes hand in hand with, again, like, not to call them difficult decisions because sending Diaz down wasn't a difficult decision, but decisions you wouldn't have expected at the start of the season has really been a theme for this year. Going back to Ian Jabot being the closer on opening day, going back to Diaz losing the closing role in spring training, obviously sending Diaz down, benching your highest paid position player in April for a guy in Noelvi Marte who wasn't even competing to make the team with where he stood on the organizational depth chart with how much he had to prove heading into spring training. Another great example was I talked to Gavin Lux, and he was talking about kind of post-trade. Gavin Lux said, day one when I got to spring training, Francona told me exactly what the plan was for me, that I'd bounce around. Lux said to have that honest conversation one-on-one with your manager is being 100% honest with you, and he's not going to lie to you. Lie is a paraphrase. He basically says he's not going to beat around the bush. He said, that's great. And then Francona, Lux said, did exactly what he said he was going to do. He's an honest guy, and he's a player's manager. And a lot of managers aren't 100% honest. They'll try to support the player. We still believe in you. You're going to get your shot. We think you can do this. And Francona's like, no, we think you're going to do this. We think this is what your role is going to be. This is how we see you. And that's what the plan is going forward. And obviously the brightest example so far was how he approached Candelario. And then the next day, Candelario kind of got his back checked out and he ended up landing on the IL with a back injury.
Yeah, and the communication thing we're talking about, hockey comparison, if there's any part of the hockey crowd listening or watching, John Tortorella. Players say the same thing about him throughout his career. Very few players liked him while playing for him, and I think that's different about Francona because I do think players like Terry Francona, but they always appreciated every player, love him or hate him. They said, you know exactly where you stand. You may not want to hear it, but you know exactly where you stand, and he communicates it that way, and that was the way he did things. And since, I don't mean to get ahead of ourselves here, but since we're on maybe a movie-themed show, you can think to a couple of movies come to mind pretty quickly with the communication style you just talked to. Jerry Maguire.
I've seen that.
Where Cuba Gooding Jr. is talking to Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise is having the meltdown when Gooding Jr. is coming out of the shower, and Cruise is losing his everything, and uh, Cuba Gooding Jr. says, "See, you think we're fighting. I think we're finally communicating." There was that. And then, of course, producer Kent knew exactly where I was going because you have to think about Moneyball. When Brad Pitt is coaching the young assistant GM on how to release a player, and the player runs through, "We appreciate your time. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, whatever." And he just cuts him off. And he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Would you rather have one to the head or 50 to the chest and you bleed to death?" Communication. There's a style of communication that's effective with professional athletes and to some people in general. But I that wasn't even on the script. See, that wasn't even on our script. And the movie conversation just bled into what we were doing. So I'm very excited about this.
Well, great. And these are references I get. I've seen these movies.
Okay, good. Good. But yeah, you go back to Candelario, and Francona said other guys are ahead of him, speaking specifically about Noelvi Marte, I'm sure. But and he touched on Diaz, but let's get to Diaz. You're right. It probably wasn't a tough decision from a baseball standpoint, but still, you have an all-star, you have a personality, you have a person and a teammate that wasn't in the plan for anyone for Alexis Diaz to be sent to Louisville at this point in the season. So how do you read the handling of that and maybe where the Reds stand right now with Diaz?
Obviously, what this is kind of a kick in the tail for Diaz to try to get him mad in a good way. Relievers should be mad and get him back on track. It's been a process going back to spring training of trying to light a fire under Diaz. And obviously the manager can only do so much. But all of this goes back to even before spring training when Francona wouldn't name Diaz the closer. He wanted to make Diaz earn it. Diaz didn't earn it. Diaz had to work on his mechanics. Diaz had to go on the IL. Diaz came back but was in low leverage positions. All of this has been kind of around the same theme. And remember, like a couple weeks ago, we'd be talking about Diaz, and I'd do the bit where I'd do like a deep sigh, and that would be like how I would start and express my thoughts about where Diaz stood. Well, all that was leading up to this. Like these are very much connected. This Diaz could have been sent down to AAA at a lot of different points over the last month, and it happened now. It was blatantly obvious, and you don't give up on him. Obviously, the talent's there. Pecan's been doing fantastic, but the Reds would love an all-star closer, and you don't get many shots to find a player like that. And it is a developmental loss that, at least in the short term, this organization wasn't able to bring the best out of Alexis Diaz consistently. But as Pat Riley said, you also have to be a participant in your own rescue, and kind of you want to see more of that fire from Diaz and more of that confidence, like we're talking about with Noelvi Marte. And that's not there. And let's see if he can figure it out in AAA.
What a great Pat Riley quote, though. I have to write that down. I've heard that, but I have to write that down. That's good.
It's a reference to what's it called? When you're on one of those fast boats over like a whitewater rafting.
Oh,
It's a reference to whitewater rafting.
that works.
If you fall off the boat, you can't just float there. No, you gotta. Or it's if the boat turns over you. No, you gotta do something that I don't know how to do.
Participate in your own rescue.
You've got to do that.
You got to be an active participant. And just to wrap this up before we get to Charlie's notebook, I kind of made a list this week of other examples of the weight of Terry Francona's words. And I can just rattle off the names and you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's conversations that have been referenced by Francona or players over the last week or so that you could tell the response that they got, the reaction they generated. You could tell what those conversations meant to certain people and certain players. Carson Spires, when he was essentially the sacrificial lamb for the game where he came in unexpectedly after the Hunter Green short start. And now Spires is injured. Hopefully he gets back. But Francona and Green went out of their way to say, hey, don't minimize what Carson Spires did. That kind of stuff resonates. After Chase Petty's debut, he got kicked in the teeth. But you guys know Terry Francona first was a big fan before it started, then stopped him on his way to his post-game media availability and gave him that pat on the back and gave him that vote of confidence that you could tell just lit that kid up that Terry Francona did that. And then before it even happened, before it even transpired, the Brent Suter, Lyon Richardson performance in the second game of the doubleheader, that Francona that night after losing said, if we come back and win, or if we get ourselves straightened out, you're going to look back at those two performances, and those are big reasons why it happened. And, essentially said the same thing about Graham Ashcraft also. And each time that happened, you could tell it made an impact, and you could tell that the voice that these guys have heard so much about, as the manager that Terry Francona is before he was here, they're starting to see that and feel that in the clubhouse. And it just feeds into, I don't want to use the word culture. I don't want to overuse it, but it feeds into what the Reds, I think, were looking to become or start to become more of with this hire and this team this year. I felt like making note of those because those kinds of things stand out to me when I hear guys talk about it.
There are definitely things he goes out of his way to almost identify his storylines almost, and those
Yeah.
are some perfect examples. And
Exactly.
he's very media savvy as well in terms of what things he wants focus on and things
Yeah.
he wants to emphasize and messaging. Like, even that side of him, you can very clearly tell that he's done this for a long time. He's answered a lot of questions in post-game press conferences and come into a lot of those knowing what he wanted to get across.
All right. Now that makes it official. We're going to move on to Charlie's notebook. And you have the new notebook. You were describing the previous notebook as being tattered and spineless. And so you've since replaced that because it's important to have the right tools for your job every day.
It's like the Reds bullpen needed a fresh arm, and they called up Yasser Zulueta. I need a fresh notebook. I like Yasser. Yasser, it's just gotta click. He's got the power. I like the fact that he has options and can go up and down, but kind of needs that swing and miss off speed pitch too. And that today has been your Yasser Zulueta conversation.
Yeah, that was free. That wasn't even on the rundown. That was just a free bit of information from inside the Reds clubhouse. But as we're standing in the clubhouse a couple of days ago, as we do typically, waiting to talk to players or waiting to talk to Francona, I'm standing there, and I alluded to on an earlier show this year that you had inspired me to buy a notebook. And so this is the notebook that I purchased at, I think, UPS or somewhere when I was sending a package somewhere. I went, I can just go ahead and get that. So I'm standing here with this kind of in my hands behind my back, talking to you or Rufus or someone. And someone comes up behind us and goes, "Hey, Bobby Boucher, you put all your good football plays in your little green notebook?" And this was Austin Wins making a movie reference. You see where this is all going, Chaz? This entire show.
I didn't get the reference, but yeah, I found it to be a fun interaction.
Well, here's the thing. I've seen The Waterboy. I've seen The Waterboy with Adam Sandler and Henry Winkler, but it came out in the 90s. So I haven't watched it 100 times since then. So I struggled a bit with the reference, but I knew what he was talking about. So I went back and looked it up, of course. And it's a reference to Henry Winkler's character, Mr. Coach Klein, wrote down as a young assistant football coach, wrote down all of his very creative, very important plays in a little green notebook, just like this one that I have. And then it was stolen from him by another assistant coach who advanced in the coaching ranks and became the villain in the movie.
That's not good. I don't like that.
It's not, but I wanted to set the table for some of this movie conversation with the fact that we kind of walked right into it this week in the Reds clubhouse. So as we talked on the last show, we had the Shawshank Redemption reference. And that kind of set off this, well, we should probably talk about movies at some point. And we're not going to overwhelm anyone, in this first show. But when I started, I had never really written down. Some people, I think, keep a list of their favorite movies. I'd never really written anything down. And when I started thinking this week, I came up, 12, 13, 14 movies. I just wrote them down really quickly. So we're not doing all that, but I'm going to feed you a couple, just feel you out on a couple of those and see where it goes. And maybe just get some feedback, and we'll just have a nice civil conversation about this. So
civil conversation.
I'm talking to myself, meaning I don't want to get too upset when I see your reaction or you start talking about some cartoon. The Shawshank Redemption is up there. I'd like for you to maybe take a look at that. It's beautifully written, very stylistic. Morgan Freeman narrates anything, and I'm in. You know that. Uh, wonderfully acted and a great story. Very original story. Obviously Stephen King. So that's all good. And all of a sudden I sound like Rufus. Have you ever talked to Rufus about movies?
Oh, Rufus is the expert.
Ooh, yeah. I wouldn't. He's forgotten more about cinema than I will ever know. Although he has a few gaping holes in his resume as well. So we'll do that later too. Man on Fire. Are you familiar with Man on Fire?
I've never heard of Man on Fire.
Okay, what you'll find out about me is probably my favorite actor is Denzel Washington. Okay, so Denzel Washington.
I know who that is. Yeah.
Okay, he's in Man on Fire. Lead character. He's a former government assassin who's looking to put his life back together in Mexico, protecting children of wealthy people at a time when kidnappings and ransoms and all that were going on.
Sounds
Great.
like a Man on Fire.
That's right. Great story. Again, very stylistic in the way that it's shot and presented. So that's always going to be up on my list. By the way, my wife and my family say that most of my favorite movies all follow the same theme or plot, that it's justice being done and some leading character with some sort of righteous anger in defense of his family or someone he loves. And they're probably not all wrong about that. So that's going to be up there too. Just to change the type of movie, this is the last one I'm going to give you. Almost Famous.
Isn't that a journalism movie? Is that what I'm thinking of?
It is.
Yeah.
And I think you would love it because it's
I think I've seen this.
loosely based
Yeah.
on Cameron Crowe's experience as a young music journalist in the early 70s. Okay? I mean, here's young.
He made the story with the band, right?
Well, I'm not going to get too deep into the movie or his life, but young
I'm
music
talking about the right movie, though, right? This is the idea.
that he goes on the road with the band to write a
Yes, okay.
story.
I'm combining two movies in my head. But yes, that is right. There's
Okay.
another journalism movie where the guy makes it up, which is also semi-true. But this is just the one where he goes on the road. Yes.
Yeah.
I've not seen this one.
Okay.
I've seen the other one.
Highly recommend that one. That's, he's a teenager. He's off on the road with this rock band in the early 70s and loosely based on some of Cameron Crowe's experience when he was a teenager, growing up and doing the same thing. So I'm going to stop at 3, and maybe we do this
Can you just
semi-regularly.
rattle off the names?
No, not giving them
Oh.
away. The list will be revealed at certain times, but that's 3 that we'll start with. And I'm just going to ask you just for one. Give me one movie that you like.
I'm just gonna stick to my roots. I mean, the movie I've seen the most and love and think is my favorite is Like Mike. It's Like Mike. It's where Calvin Cambridge is the character's name. Lil Bow Wow gets a pair of magic shoes and plays in the NBA. It is a fantastic movie.
Okay, and you want to know? I haven't seen it.
Fantastic movie. Funny, heartfelt, sports, like
Mhm.
quality sports. I saw it a couple months ago again for the millionth time. It holds up.
Okay. Do you have a type? Are you looking to be energized from
I would say light is the
Light.
theme.
Okay.
That's why I like a lot of kids' movies.
Not violence and not romance and not
Put your
superhero.
place for that. That's great. I've seen some of those movies. I would say my favorite movies are in the PG range.
Yeah, I can do that. Producer Kent chimes in with Fargo. Excellent film. Again, I like things that are a little bit different, a little bit creative, and I appreciate the performances, and that one checks all the boxes. So let's just leave it at that right now. And maybe we invite Rufus in or producer Kent in and we expand the conversation at some point, but we couldn't ignore it for another week. We had to at least touch on it given what's happened in the first few episodes of this podcast.
One thing, I've gotten more comments supporting Phineas and Ferb over the last week than any other part of my life. So thank you. I would like to say thank you.
Okay.
Why do you have to not like Phineas and Ferb?
I've never seen an episode of Phineas and Ferb. It had been on in the background when my kids were younger, but that's it. So I'd heard them mention
So
them.
why is that a negative? Let's make it a positive.
I didn't say it was a negative. I just meant that when we're talking about movies and cinema, that That's not
Clearly haven't seen Phineas and Ferb across the second dimension, but here I go.
I have not. I have not. I'm going to cut you off right there. Let's finish this up and get it back on the rails with a little bit of baseball. And you wrote a fantastic piece on Charlie's chalkboard about the path and the journey of Gavin Lux to Cincinnati and to the Reds. What stood out to you the most in that piece, in that conversation you had with him about where he's been, where he is, and who he is?
It's kind of my favorite version of sports story. It's a guy hits rock bottom. He figures out something about himself and then he pays it forward. So at this point last year, Gavin Lux was going home sleepless nights asking himself, am I ever going to be able to do this again? He missed the entire 2023 season with a torn ACL. And coming back, he wasn't hitting the ground running the way he expected. And not just that, he was at first the shortstop, but then he got demoted from that role. But still the second baseman of the Los Angeles Dodgers. That is a position that carries a heck of a spotlight. And entering last year, in his mind, it was going to be Freddie at first, Mookie at second, and Gavin at short for the next 6 to 10 years of Dodgers baseball. And obviously that didn't pan out, and that was incredibly tough on him. He credits his wife, his fiance Molly, who's actually a physical therapist, for helping keeping him sane, almost keeping him locked in, keeping him as confident as he could possibly be when the world was kind of crumbling out from under him from a baseball perspective and a confidence perspective. The quote from Dave Roberts about how he got back on track was he had to get his legs and his timing back, but at one point he just said, forget it, I'm just going to play baseball. And he freed himself up mentally, and all of that, of course, paid off in the highest leverage of moments in the World Series. He said he had a couple of those, including the game-tying sac fly in the clincher for the Dodgers, where he said, it's an anxiety-filled moment. If I could get through this, I can get through anything. And you're seeing him pay it forward, too, like Matt McClain missed the entire 2024 season, struggling a bit. Gavin Lux has been a guy who Matt can talk to and relate to. And, for Gavin, those guys were Freddie Freeman and Clayton Kershaw. And now he's one of those guys on the Reds. He's young, but he's one of the most experienced, polished veteran players. And kind of that's what sports are all about. That's what leadership's all about. Just a really cool story from a guy who seems to have found a great fit with the Reds.
So he's clearly playing extremely well and playing that role extremely well for the Reds right now. As you kind of dove into what's making him successful at the plate this season, what did you hear in his approach so far with the Reds?
I said this on the show, I think on Monday. He is the style of hitter that they had exactly in mind when they got Jeimer Candelario, and we'll talk about Jeimer another time. But there is a polish, a poise, a veteran savvy in his at-bats. The way he knows pitchers really stands out. And then he has a really cool approach, too. He's looking for his pitch. He's ready to jump on something. He has that power he can tap into. But what he's really known for this year, the thing everyone brings up, is what he does with two strikes. I asked Gavin, that this polished two-strike approach that you're showing, have you always been like that? Is that a 2025 thing? Here's Gavin Lux talking about his approach at the plate.
When I'm, kind of just thinking beat mode where I'm not thinking about mechanics, but I get an everyday at bat, but that's kind of usually how I've been. Just kind of take my chances early, and then if I don't get the pitches on it, I don't mind getting a two-strike count. Yeah, just trying to grind guys out, and they can work and make them throw pitches. So I think that's kind of a little bit how I've always been, even when I was younger too.
It's the perfect compliment to Ellie De La Cruz. To when McClain gets rolling, he'll be another aggressive power, and maybe some strikeouts mixed in here and there as well. Gavin Lux is exactly the type of polish that really lengthens out a lineup.
I love it. It's been fun to watch. So this weekend, the Reds move on from the Cardinals series and welcome the Washington Nationals in for the weekend at Great American Ballpark. Let's do a quick look at the Nationals, and all I could do was look at a couple of names. Obviously, some young players that have been on the come up the last couple of years. C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, they'll see, I think, on Sunday. What's your take on this series before they head back out on the road?
Well, first of all, James Woods, one of the coolest players in baseball. Talk about electric, not as much the base running as Ellie De La Cruz, but from a power, from what he can do, and you're not expecting to crank out a crazy homer. You're not expecting off a sawed-off opposite field swing that carries over the fence. He's playing really well. He can change this series. The biggest thing, in my opinion, is two lefties on the mound for the Nationals. Gore is a guy who has been the best strikeout starting pitcher in baseball this year. And then you look at what's been so much a key for the Reds against left-handed pitching. You have Austin Hayes. And that's, to me, going to be the big storyline of the weekend. Hayes has not played the last couple of days because of a, quote, tender hamstring. Francona said, and we're recording this at 10:30 on Friday. Francona said that yesterday or on Thursday, Hayes was going to test it out pregame and see how he felt. And that was going to be very big in determining the next steps. And frankly, he looked like he was about 25%. Honestly, the test was mostly kind of conversations with the physical training staff and the medical staff, and then he kind of did some stretches as well. He was not running like you'd expect. Very interested to see what the next step is for Austin Hayes. They need him this weekend, but you got to protect him as well. Especially you need him against left-handed pitching, but again, he's got to be able to play. He's got to be able to run. So to me, what Hayes is able to do, combined with what kind of the next guys in line, that's McLean, Marte, Steer, Tyler Stevenson, question mark, can do against left-handed pitching. That to me will be a big storyline of the weekend.
All right. I would like to wrap this up by pointing out that we were 0 for 4 on movies. 3 that I mentioned that you haven't seen, 1 that you mentioned that I haven't seen. But I think that generates good conversation, right?
I had fun.
We're here to learn about each other.
Yeah.
I think that's going to continue to be a good thing. Share it with a friend, right?
Share it with a friend.
Why don't you do some of this? Sell the podcast.
Tell a friend. Subscribe, rate, review. Find it on YouTube. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. I don't have that section up on the rundown. Am I missing anything, Brian?
I think you're good. So watch more baseball, watch more movies. Chaz, we'll see you at the ballpark.